This time on ECHORIFT, the boys talk about Batman 0 Year Part 1.
Brought to you from historic Studio L, it's the ECHORIFT Show, your pop culture lightning rod. Each episode, we bring you the best in comics, movies, television, books, fast food, and anything else our producer can think of. I'm Don, co-creator of ECHORIFT Comics.
I'm Mike, the artist.
And I'm Dan, a comic book journalist.
We are getting together here with Dan, our co-host from the Comic Tango podcast, doing a little cross-promotion, a little cross-breeding, and we're also getting ready to talk about Batman 0 Year.
Who says people don't love an origin, Don?
They are, and the thing that's amazing about Batman is the way that you can keep telling the origin over and over again and doing it slight massages, slight differences, and it still ends up paying off because, as you say, people love an origin story.
I don't even say that. I say the origin story is the story. Because it is, period.
This is interesting because one of the things I had read when they first came out with this was there was talk, because we just got done doing Batman Year 1 by Frank Miller a few months ago. And I had read that Snyder was sort of trying to, I thought I had read something where he alluded to the fact that this was sort of not going to contradict that or whatever. And it does. And it doesn't bother me that it does. But it's in the same tone in that it's not like he's doing any wild departures. He changes, really the only thing he changes is the Commissioner Gordon or Lieutenant Gordon's role in things and how he and Batman meet and those kind of details. But it didn't bother me at all. Like, I mean, I think both of those stories can exist independently and be what they are.
How does anyone here know how this fits into the canon, or is it just another version of the story?
It's the new canon, right? It's the new 52's take on this, and I think,
okay,
yeah.
So it is new canon, basically.
Yeah, I think it's like untold stories of the time of him becoming Batman.
10-4.
Yeah, I think what they decided was that as much as everybody, probably for a long time, unless, looking back, people end up deciding that 0 Year tells the origin, more distinctly for the character. I think Year 1 is still that bookmark that we look to as the origin story, or the first year, I guess, for Batman. And so I think that what they were recognizing was that even though we still sort of look to that as our reference point for where Batman started in the new era, of this new 52 where everything's supposed to have been rebooted, they hadn't really gone through that, ground floor material, and so they needed to tell that story.
And they also have a lot of weird things with the new 52 when it comes to Batman, and I think Green Lantern as well, where they didn't quite reboot it. Like in Batman #1 in the new 52, there's Damian Wayne, Batman's half-son. We read that story on the show. It's his son. It's not his half-son. It's his son is Robin, and there's implication that there were two other Robins before him. Well, if this is the new 52 and it's 5 years after Justice League, when did he have time to go through all these Robins? So there's been some weird stuff, and I don't know if this is either trying to correct that or just fill in that story so it makes sense.
Well, and I think that that's where it comes from with Snyder saying that it's not meant to contradict Year 1, is that they are trying to have it both ways, in sort of the best of what used to be still sort of somehow applies, and I think that this is definitely one of those cases where he's not deviating too much while not just being a literal retelling of the same story so that people have a reason to read it. But, at the same time, it's not, becoming something completely separate.
Yeah. And for the focus of this episode, we're going to end up doing 3 episodes on this, I think. We're going to cover the first 4 issues of it. And then we'll do another episode to do the next 4. And then
Part 2.
And then this story arc, it's 12 issues long, so it's a year. It won't end until July. So sometime in July, we'll do the last part.
Part 3.
And what I thought was interesting about this, and it goes to the Year 1 discussion, is Snyder is the captain of the Batman ship. And something that he's doing, I read ahead a little bit, and I'm sure some of our listeners have, because I think these 4 issues were published late in the fall and into Christmas time. He's got a story to tell, so he's inserting people and characters like the Riddler appears, Edward Nygma, he's inserting characters that will serve him later as part of the origin, and that's something that I don't think Frank Miller cared about or had. I mean, he inserts Catwoman into that story, but for the most part, Scott Snyder probably has a little more of an agenda going forward to set up stories that he intends to tell later.
I liked Edward Nygma.
Yeah,
when he's introduced, he's being talked to. I don't know if you remember the scene, but I guess it's Bruce's uncle. I think he's talking with him, and you don't know who he's talking to, and he says something about you and your web and your cat's cradle, and he's describing something visual, and we have a frame where it's revealed that he's talking to this man who's standing in the middle of like threads that are stretched all around him.
Yeah.
Did you grasp what was going on there? It's such a strange introduction that I loved it.
I think it's just, this is a weird guy, and this is the way. I mean, because there's like little notes pinned to the pieces of string, and
because the Riddler. My impression of the Riddler is that he's kind of an ass.
Yeah, Frank Gorshin.
Just dancing around and being silly. And to paint this guy as like a real eccentric, I thought was a cool move. And I don't know if that's a normal one. I mean, do you guys know the Riddler enough to know if he's normally the dancing, prancing character or if he's this character?
I think this is the first comic I've read with the Riddler in it. Like, of all the Batman comics I've read, and I've probably read more than I think I have, I don't think I've ever read one with the Riddler in it.
Okay.
I've read a few different Riddler stories, and it depends on what they're using him for, because sometimes he is that. He's just sort of the goon that, has this odd shtick, but I've read before, and I think that I'd even heard recently someone talk about the Riddler, is that the best Riddler story is one where he is looking for someone who is as brilliant as he is, and I think that that's sort of what Bruce is doing, is that he's the eccentric because he's such the mastermind. He has so much intelligence that everything is that level, where he has a room of strings and notes and all these different probabilities, and I think that that's such a cool image. To me, that was what hooked me. When I saw that, I was like, now this is a character, even if they didn't say a name, it's a character where instantly you're like, something's going on here, because they kept him off panel for a while, and then when we see the room, it's so stark and what's, off-putting about it.
And he might be crazy, or he might be brilliant, or he might be both. Like that's the image I got from him. Like, how when you were introduced to Hannibal Lecter, he's crazy and brilliant.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess that's clear that he's crazy and brilliant. What I thought that was neat, that this is a little less stark in the sense that he's not a guy who's known to eat people in a cell for that reason.
Right.
That he's sort of pulling strings, I guess literally. I mean, maybe that's what the meaning was, because he's the one operating like Wayne Industries, right? I mean, he's in charge of the uncle.
The way I understand it is the uncle probably doesn't see it that way. The uncle is the CEO. And,
well, of course.
And he hired Nygma to be his sort of major domo and to sort of be the strategist and give him advice and sort of get the edge on the competition and analyze data and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I suspect in the end that the Riddler, we're going to find out at the end of this storyline, the Riddler does something terrible, and he becomes the Riddler. At this point, he's just Edward Nygma, which is clearly a pseudonym of some kind, and they refer to that. I mean, this is a made up name that he's running around with. And I also liked how he looked. There's a lot of things I really like Capullo's artwork, but one of the things I find he misses on me for his faces. There are a lot of times where I feel like, particularly in those early Batman issues where it was Batman, Robin, Damian, or Bruce and Dick and all these guys, and they all had the exact same face and the same haircut and everything. And that really, it was just disappointing. In this, I really like the look of Nygma. He's got that dorky, he's got a little bit of a pot belly, and he sort of stands with a slouch, but he's got this his face is really cool, and he's got those big, long, orange, like, sort of mutton chops. And I really think he cuts a really interesting look. Like, the character design was really well done. And I think that fits in with all the other stuff. Well, the way
he looks sort of like MacGyver and Richie Cunningham.
Yeah.
He's got that mullet. Yeah,
and he's got the checkered pants.
Yeah, and he's sort of a modern madman, I guess, in the sense that he looks like a computer nerd or something along those lines, and less like the sort of classic view of the way I think he always used to look. Anyway, I like the take on him.
And he's got that skeevy, he's also got that skeevy sort of maybe criminal past look to him, like the way he's dressed or something. Like,
yeah.
He really fits well. And I think, I mean, we're spending so much time talking about him, but I think it's because he's meant to make this great impression for the rest of the 0 Year storyline.
Well, yeah, and it was striking to me that it wasn't the Joker.
Yeah.
That the Riddler got such a big role. And again, that my impressions are just that the Joker belonged there theoretically.
Yeah.
And that the Snyder clearly made the decision to go with, someone not the Joker.
Because the true threat in this first story arc, so in these first 4 issues, it's actually 3 issues that are called Secret City, and then the 4th issue that we're reading is the setup for the next arc, which is called Dark City. And Secret City is really about Batman battling Bruce Wayne, he's not Batman yet, battling the Red Hood gang. And this Nigma thing and his uncle are sort of a backdrop. But before we get into that, I don't want to miss, I love the way this opens. Like, there's something really cinematic about all this in this storytelling. It opens with this 6 years earlier, and Gotham looks like something out of Planet of the Apes. It's like buildings are all crumbling, and there's grass up and down the sides, and the subway system is full of water and fish. And there's this kid fishing in the subway system, and these thugs show up, and Batman, who looks like something out of like Walking Dead or Mad Max. Yeah, he's got the Batman mask on, but the rest of him is just like he's just taped up, and he's riding this dirt bike, and he's got a crossbow on his back. And the kid's got a really cool line. Like, they have a really cool interaction that cuts into the rest of the story. The kid says, "He thinks you're dead, you know. He's been telling everyone that ever since he killed the city." And then Batman just replies, "Good, then he won't see me coming." And I read that so quickly the first time that I just was sort of a little disoriented. And then the next scene is 5 months earlier, so 5 months before 6 months ago. And then, like, I went back when I was reviewing for the episode, and I'm like, wait, that's wild. We have no idea who this kid's talking about. How the hell? Like, Batman I don't think of as being something that goes off the rails like Gotham turns into. First of all, it's Gotham in the past turns into, like, Planet of the Apes. And it's a really wild way to start this story.
Yeah. Yeah, it was unsettling. In fact, the only complaint I have is that I'd forgotten about that by the time I was at the end of 4 issues.
Yeah,
because it's so quick, that weird introduction. It's never really referred to again, right?
No.
I mean, obviously it will be.
Yeah,
but I'd forgotten that.
Well, and I love those types of stories where they sort of start you at, not necessarily a climax, but they start you at a point in the story that things are so far in. And then you're sort of from then until you catch up to it again, you're just, because you're going to come, you're going to flash back and fill in the gaps. You're just left with that, well, how do we get there? What's going to happen? And there's so much in just a few panels that puts you off from where you expected the story to go. You see something that, like Don's saying, it's in the past, and we've seen Gotham since then, and we know it doesn't look that way. And we also know that this happens, like you're saying, after those few panels, in 5 months. And so it's like, how does Gotham go to be so overgrown in 5 months? How do we get back from that? Why is Bruce on a motorcycle? Who is he talking about? Like, you instantly get 7 or 8 questions, and it's not like the Lost type questions of like something really grand, but they're pointed enough where you need to turn the page because you have to know the answer to it.
Yeah, and then you turn the page and you're not going to get it.
Right.
It's just great infusion of mystery, and there's a couple ways you can do that. Sometimes you can present something that truly happened in the past, like a crime scene, and I guess this is like a different version of a crime scene.
Yeah.
Or you can present something that's sort of in this. It's the future, right?
No,
anyway, I can't. You guys keep
that's
saying
what's
past,
so
future.
crazy.
I'm so
It's 6 years before now is when we see Gotham looking like that. So there's something crazy, which I'm excited about because I do think of Batman as being a lot more street level, and it's just like
you don't think apocalyptic.
Yeah, and or him dealing with, I guess, superpowered people or people with technology to do something like this to the city. So you cut to the 5 months earlier, and you see Bruce doing his vigilante thing, and it's really neat. At this point in time, his costume is just to put on rubber masks to look like other people, and that's pretty neat. Like, it's a neat thing to consider him Like you see the growth of him knowing I need a disguise, I need to look like other people. Also, looking like other people gets him into places in a way like a cowl and a mask doesn't.
Yeah.
But it was neat, and that was another one of those little subtleties that didn't strike me right away until he does it twice. And the second time he did it, I'm like, oh, this is his mask. Like his mask is to dress up like other human beings. And they're dealing with this Red Hood gang, which is really strange to me. And I think the other issues that led up to this have dealt with the Red Hood gang. Like I think a person who read Batman New 52 from issue 1 probably knows a little bit more about that.
His writing of the dialogue and the voice of the Red Hood is funny. Like he calls Batman Hoss at one point.
Yeah.
Yeah, he uses that weird language, and it paints that instant image of what's under that, because there's no physical features to the face, so you have no idea who the speaker is, and because this is a comic book and it's written text, you don't know what the voice sounds like. So that's when I remember that as well, as some of the language that you're reading, and you're just like, who is this person? Because it doesn't point to anyone either.
Yeah, he has this beyond charm. It's like this gregariousness. That he's a likable character. I mean, and he's funny. Like his take on his position on just his verbal responses to whatever situation they're in, whether it's bad or worse, is detached.
Yeah.
And he seems to be more interested in not telling jokes, but maintaining his positive attitude. Anyway, he's very well written, because it is. I personally find it hard to hear the character, like actually to begin to hear their voice in comic books. I usually can get into their emotions, but I don't have a sense of what they would sound like, if I were to hear them in person.
And it's funny because there are characters where it doesn't matter as much. Like, for example, for Batman, no matter what voice I have in my head, for Batman himself, it actually isn't as important that I hear his voice as a distinct thing as it is to like hear Alfred's voice differently, or to hear the Red Hood, particularly someone with a mask. Like they need that voice, or else you can't identify them. I'm assuming the Red Hood's the Joker, right? I mean, I haven't read enough,
right? And that's
or the beforehand.
That's one of the origins of the Joker, is that he was originally the leader of the Red Hood.
That's
gang.
what I thought,
and that's the thing, is that he's playing this fine line of like, is that coy, joking, sarcasm, sort of the roots of what the Joker becomes, and then that cynicism grows into it, or is it someone different? Like, he continues to skirt it so that you don't know for sure. And would it be so obvious? Would he make it the Joker?
Yeah, that's funny. I didn't know that.
Yeah, because in the end, in fact,
well, that explains why he's funny, I guess.
Or it could. I mean, that's what's so cool about it. And then there's the in the final battle with the Red Hood, and where Batman sort of defeats him. At that final battle, the Red Hood puts on a cape and he's holding a cane and he's like strutting around. And I'm thinking, this has got to be the Joker, right? Like, and he falls in a vat. And I think it would be cool that if Scott Snyder is messing with people, like, you've seen the movie, you've seen these other comics, like, I'm going to do what I want with this character, but maybe
he's got to be the Joker. I can't imagine that.
Well, and that's one of the coolest things about the Joker, is that they continue to say that we see these different origins because nobody knows who he really is, and so there's all these myths.
Yeah,
and so they play up the idea that we keep seeing the origin of the Joker retold or referred to differently as just different spins on the myth of who he might have been. And so I think it's like he's almost using that to the advantage of this scenario of, okay, well, people have always, that's one of the ones that stuck, that the Joker used to be the leader of the Red Hood and he fell in a vat of acid. But what if that's just another myth? And what if I'm just misleading you again? So it's another one of the mysteries within this story that is not necessarily the point of it, but he finds ways, and this is something that I do love about Snyder. He finds ways that this is just supposed to be Batman's first year. It's an origin story. It's showing us how he got to be where we see him now. But he's finding ways to, like Don's saying, root in all these other characters, and we're seeing the origins of Edward Nygma. We're seeing the origins of what the Red Hood was. We might be seeing the Joker. We might be seeing early Gotham. But it never feels overwhelming. It doesn't have that too much, in one story problem that we run into when a story tries to include 6 villains or whatever.
Yeah, it seems like he's got 12 issues, and that's kind of unheard of in comics now, to do a story arc that long that isn't an independent book or a summer event kind of thing. Like, I think AVX might have been 12 issues, but that was, or Infinity might have been, but that was like every 2 weeks a new issue, different creative teams, all these other things. It was like this big fun summer blockbuster mashup.
Did
This
you-
is very serious.
Did you read the stories, the little stories at the end of each one?
I did not.
You should, because they're really good.
Are they?
I don't know if you remember them, but there's the three. I think I read three of them.
Yeah, the
I mean, I
fourth
read-
issue doesn't have
Okay,
the
that's
mini
why.
story at the end of the fourth issue is Nigma doing his thing.
The I think the first one says like 19 years old, and then the next one's
Oh yeah, no, you know what?
21.
I do
Yeah,
remember
one he's like in
those.
a race car.
well, yeah, he's with this bad guy overseas somewhere, and I think it might be somewhere in South America, and they're racing from the cops, and the cops are crashing and everything behind them, and the criminal is explaining to Bruce that, you know, when you're in a car like this, and it's something that no one's ever seen before, and it's so impressive that they want to see you get away. That they
That's cool.
he said he drove through a museum and had stolen like all this Incan artwork without ever going below 30 miles an hour and all this, and he's describing this about the importance of a car.
Okay, that's
and that
cool.
is such a great reference to the Batmobile. Like
That's
it explains everything that would inspire Bruce to adopt the craziest car the police will ever see.
Yeah.
And the second story is about gadgetry,
Okay.
and that he was taught to basically the bottom line is it gets down to the idea of not just improvising but having all the right tools, and then of course knowing the right combination, using them. And again, great detail about Batman. And then the third one, if I remember right, I was reading this one the most rapidly, but I really enjoyed them, was about not I think it was about not killing your enemy, which
Yeah, I
have
saw
a
that
huge
title.
problem with.
But again, it's effective use of space, right? Like we're just saying about all the different layers, and not only are we supposed to be seeing the first year that Bruce is Batman, but we're also then seeing flashbacks to what else is influencing him.
Yeah.
And I think that it's really cool that we get to see the travels of Bruce before he returned to Gotham and how those different adventures that he went on, even though, you know, and we've seen it in the movies too, sometimes it brought him to questionable places about what's morally okay.
Yeah.
But it still all influences what he eventually becomes. And I think that that's awesome that Snyder finds a way to tell us those little vignettes of, like you're saying, the car and the gadgets and all those pieces that you can figure out why it's there. And now we get to see, well, why is, you know, like we know now why he's doing those things, or where they were born from, and we don't need that to be part of this, you know, linear story that we're seeing in 0 Year.
And it's great foreshadowing, because it's all you like as you're reading that. I did actually read. I think I might not have like really paid attention, but I went through all of them. Like everything you just said, I rang a bell. And I remember just feeling like it was exciting foreshadowing, because I feel like there's no way this storyline ends and we don't get to see the Batmobile. And we get to see him use some gadgets in this first like before he has the cowl, because this storyline ends with him deciding to become the Batman. And in the last issue of the 4 issues, he is the Batman. But he's got like those boots that hold him on the ceiling. So you're starting to get to see like the little bits and pieces of this coming together.
Yeah. Well, in the last one, I'm so in love with it, because I'm like, oh, here they're gonna sit me down and explain to me why Batman won't kill anybody. And maybe I misinterpreted it, but I really bought it, which is the exciting part. Is he's fighting sort of in this? Imagine like Thunderdome.
Okay.
There's a woman. There's a kind of a real savagery around them, and it seems like she's in charge of him being in this pit having to fight guys.
Okay.
But she's like, she says something to the effect of, well, you should kill them, because otherwise they'll just keep coming. You know, like if you don't kill them, they won't keep coming, or they'll keep coming, or whatever. You know what I mean? And he ends up he won't do it, and the implication at the end, the guys actually become afraid of him, so they stop coming.
Okay.
The guys that are on the floor beaten up, or want to be drug away, and it was neat just to see that by not killing, the implication was that he would inspire more fear.
Yeah,
and
it's more psychologically
his
damaging.
victims would live to tell about him. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, that is cool. Plus, some things are worse living with, particularly in that scenario. It doesn't apply quite to the "I'm going to catch you and bring you to the justice," but it applies to a situation like that, where it's like now you've got to hobble the rest of your life thanks to me, and you're never going to forget who did this to you. And I want to talk about Capullo's artwork, because I've had I mentioned the thing about his faces, and I wish that wasn't the only thing I had said so far, because I don't want it to sound like I dislike him. I really like his artwork. And I don't think I ever appreciated it until I read this. And the other Batman stuff I read, I don't know what it is. Like, I want to go back and read it again. I know I've been really critical of some of it in the past. Those first, like, 8 to 12 issues, I called it dumb. The thing that I picked up on that he does that I don't see other people doing is it's all about the poses that people are in.
Mm-hmm.
He draws characters doing things you don't see characters do. They're very mundane, simple things. Like, they'll be talking and Bruce will just be like putting his pants on while they're in the middle of a conversation. It makes sense why he'd be getting dressed. Or the way someone's body language is, or the way they're leaning against a table or something. It's amazing. Like, his artwork, I've always thought of him being, probably because of the way he came out of Spawn and did all that stuff, but he definitely is in the Todd McFarlane school of that kind of line work and that kind of stuff. And I think you can see that McFarlane was definitely either one of his tutors or one of his inspirations, but I know they worked together for years. But I could over and over again, I was looking, I was like, there's some really amazing graphic design going on here and like visual storytelling, and the guy's been around for a long time. He knows what he's doing, he knows how to get the job done, and it really shows. And I wonder if this is the first chance he's had to be like at the top spot, because I know that he did Spawn, and I
like this wardrobe that he gave Bruce. Bruce has a cool leather jacket on. Early on, it's just interesting to behold, and then later on when he's, I guess, officially Batman, he's got a costume like I don't recall ever seeing before, and
it reminds you of like Under Armour, not armor.
Yeah,
like,
and his musculature isn't too big. He looks like a guy that works out, but like also eats well, and is also wearing some armor.
Yeah,
so there's this, and like once he's fighting at the end, he's this sort of like a tank, but not say as heavy as he is in Dark Knight.
Yeah.
Or Dark Knight Returns.
The other thing I think that's neat is I think it's always, I don't think there's ever an exception, when Batman's cowl is always solid black.
And that's for me,
always.
When you were talking about this, not only do I love his ability to sort of capture things to a level of realism that isn't that like photorealistic where it's like always grit, but he still manages it, like it almost feels like he is like on site location for these scenes because it seems so to scale. And same thing with character poses, like it almost feels like he's always drawing from reference because he does grab that almost perfectly. But the thing that I noticed early, and this is when you were talking about the early issues, the thing that stood out to me the most, that when I was reading a few different Batman titles at the same time when the New 52 launched, that I noticed he did that nobody else was doing. And I think this comes from his Spawn early days, and
that
sort
horror.
of is that he draws Batman as this monolithic, almost lack of color, lack of definition, and there are times when he's just a full shadow except for the white eyes. And I think that that's such a great, he captures that tone in such a way that, and it really does complement Snyder's writing style, that I think you just like, there's always this level of I don't want to say horror, but there's just this level of serious threat and scare to the Batman figure.
Yeah, and and you're right. It did really make me think of Spawn, but at the same time, Batman has his cape, and it's not crazy, and it's not Spawn. But like you said, I wonder if it's stuff that he brought from that, like because this has some of that. It has this story arc doesn't, but it has the sort of scary, violent villains and those sort of things. And I do like. I guess Gordon doesn't appear much in this. He's only in the very end of it. But I really like the way he renders Gordon, and just there's so much character. It's like Nigma. He puts so much character in his face, and he's just so distinct. It's funny, there's so much to talk about. We didn't really get into some of the other things. There's a great dramatic moment between Bruce and Alfred where Alfred calls him a coward. And of course there's awesome detective stuff, which is something that I think I forget Batman is about. And in the end, he uses detective skills to take out the Red Hood gang, which is just awesome.
Right, and I think we'll see that even more going into parts 2 and 3 as the Riddler story arc gets bigger and he plays up the clues and the mastermind thing. I think Snyder's really going to showcase that detective side of Bruce.
Yeah.
My favorite scene in it is there's a scene between Bruce and Nigma in in the Sphinx room.
Yeah, in the museum. Yeah.
And it's very curiously drawn. It's that snake eating itself, but it's a symbol. He actually names what it is.
Yeah.
And that's it, Don.
They're having a conversation about this.
Yeah, they have a conversation it's filled with riddles, and Bruce is on to him, and It's just pretty neat that it's a very early version of them matching wits.
Yeah.
And Bruce is every bit as equal, even though he chooses, the Riddler chooses to talk like an ass.
And Bruce figures out his riddle too, because the riddle relates to how Bruce can get out of the room.
Yeah.
And then Enigma points out immediately that there isn't any other doors.
Yeah, there's this grudging admiration between them. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. It's going to be great to see them go forward, particularly as he becomes the Riddler. All right, that's our show. We're going to be at Free Comic Book Day on Saturday, May 2nd. Dan's going to be with us. It's going to be Mike and Dan and I. We're going to be recording podcasts, and we're going to be handing out Hurry Mini comics. So you should come join us at the comic book shop in Wilmington, Delaware. You can go to our website, or you can go to their website and find out all the details. And if you come, say hi. We would like to meet you if we haven't met you before. And if we've met you before, we can high five or shake hands or something.
I think so. I think that's what's going to happen. A lot of hand motion.
All right, my name is Don. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Don_Garvey.
And I'm at Connolly_Mike.
And I'm at Panuch.
Go to ECHORIFT.com to download previous episodes of this show. And also send us letters at ECHORIFT.com, or call us and leave us a voicemail, 856-208-RIFT. Also, tune in if you haven't already. You can hear Dan and Mike and I talk comics and issues related to comics on the Comics Tango Show. So Google that or go to ECHORIFT.com and check that out. There's 3 episodes out so far, and it's a cool show. We're getting a lot of really great feedback, and we couldn't be more pleased with the reception it's getting.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
This has been an Echo Rift production. Go to EchoRift.com to learn more.